as it relates to its carbon footprint, is pretty dirty. The U.S. Green Building Council reports that 39% of all CO2 emissions come from buildings, and over the next 25 years, it's expected to be the fastest producer of CO2 emissions as well. Steve Pallrand, a remodeler and reclamation expert, who I recently sat down with for an interview, is trying to make it a little bit cleaner. Steve, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Steve owns Homefront Build out of Los Angeles, a remodeler and custom builder that incorporates locally salvaged building materials into nearly every single one of its projects. And to be clear, when I say salvaged in this case, it's not just going and finding reclaimed materials. Steve and his team will meticulously demolish entire homes in order to save as much materials from landfills as possible. During our interview, I asked him to tell me a little bit more about how his company got into material reclamation and for a few tips for anyone considering the same.
We began in the historic market, and what we originally started to do was we were taking apart historic homes that were in the way of new construction, and we did so because we wanted to get those old materials to match the older houses that we're remodeling or doing additions to. And in so doing, we realized that, this type of, the demolition in general is just such a waste. When we took these old homes apart, the framing was from the 1920s. This is old growth out here in California. This is old growth Douglas fir. The siding is old growth redwood. You can't get that quality material anymore. We realized, of course, then this was a very green practice, because we're, instead of milling new material and transporting it to market, we're using stuff that is salvaged locally. And then that just began a broader investigation into not just wood products, but how else could we reuse materials rather than just, as you said, just get the excavator in, boom, get the stuff out. Wood, when sent to the dump, actually causes more greenhouse gases than if you took your scrap wood and chipped it on site and used it as mulch. So there's many ways to look at reducing the carbon footprint of your demolition process.
What are the things that you go in looking for to take out of the project?
Yeah, older homes tend to be very poorly built. So framing or cladding. Those are the primary things you get out of a house. Older houses could have 1x sheeting rather than plywood sheeting, and that's wonderful because 1x Douglas fir, reuse that for flooring. We'll mill a tongue and groove into it and reuse as flooring or other types of finishes. So old roof sheeting is something to look at. Anything pre-plywood. Framing, of course, cladding, like I said. Shingles, no. Shingles get very dry and fall apart, but siding is wonderful. Brick foundation, you can typically old mortar falls apart very easily. You can reuse that for pathways or something. We can't reuse masonry as out here the same way you can in other areas because of our earthquake standards. But in other places, you could use those for foundations or other uses. But here we take old bricks and then use them for hardscaping. And same thing with concrete. Instead of hauling that off to the dump and wasting that money, break it up and use what we call urbanite and make these wonderful pathways and hardscaping out of it. Stair steps, there's all sorts of wonderful ways of using urbanite. Doors are also, doors and trim work is a possibility. The problem sometimes with doors is that older homes, the doors were 28 inches or 30 inches. Now the code, at least in California, is 32 inches. So sometimes we have to use the old doors as closet doors, a pair of closet doors or a pair of laundry. But there's innovative ways of using that stuff. So flooring is possible. Depends on how damaged the flooring is. Subfloor, like the attic, like the roof sheeting, is great. Older homes will have diagonal Douglas fir 1x. That's wonderful to reuse as rebuild as flooring. There are some people looking at gypsum reclaiming, but that's a little more difficult locally because not everybody can reclaim gypsum and do that kind of stuff.
In an effort to confirm the efficacy of his team's salvage and reuse strategies, Steve's taken on a number of projects to help quantify his results and expand the understanding of just how truly big a home's carbon footprint can be. He explains how one project in particular led him to developing a website that can help homeowners, builders, and remodelers alike improve home construction and operation to ultimately lower the building's environmental impact.
a developer approached me, and there was a two-story Craftsman house in the Pico Union area of town, and we actually quantified that, took the house apart because we got a price to lot clear it with a bulldozer and all those trash bins. Then what we did is we also quantified everything we got out of it, how much it cost, the whole cost of it, and compared them. And it was the labor cost was the same, and we got materials out of it. So it actually was proved to be an effective economic strategy, not just a carbon strategy. But in doing that, what we realize is, of course, we're lowering the carbon footprint of our new construction because we're not getting when you look at a building, a building we often look at the operational energy of a building. How much what's the carbon cost of living in my house? Heating, cooling, water heating, cooking, all that, drying clothes, washing clothes, all that kind of stuff. Put a solar array on top of your house, you're reducing the operational energy footprint. Maybe you become a net energy producer, blah, blah, blah. We have a lot of information out there about that. But what we as an industry don't really concentrate on is the carbon cost, the one-time carbon cost of the structure itself, building. The whole salvage thing led to a larger discussion of like, wow, how can we impact the building process by lowering our carbon footprint? What we did is we created this website, an open source website, which has these tools on it. It's called sustainablebuild.org. And you can go to that site, enter in your zip code, and you can look at what your carbon footprint of your operational energy or the embodied energy, and then you can analyze if you did things like line dry your clothes, how does that, or if you did an induction cooktop, how can I lower my carbon footprint? Because I think that, the issue for us in this industry is that if you go buy a car, there is information out there about how to lower your carbon footprint. You can buy a Bolt, or a Hummer, and you can compare that. But in our industry, we don't really provide that kind of information. We don't get people thinking about the carbon costs. So the whole salvage thing led to a larger discussion of like, wow, how can we impact the building process by lowering our carbon footprint?
For more information about Steve or Homefront Build, go to homefrontbuild.com. For more information about sustainablebuild.org, go to, obviously, sustainablebuild.org.